Hey there, it's Gail Root. Forgive me for having a little delay in our podcast. I have been very faithful to the every Wednesday drop. But many of you probably know, if you're listening or you follow me, that I was in Israel. And there's a backstory, and it was just an incredible experience. And I'm going to try today to start to share that journey with you. I know there's many of you who have been asking and wanting to hear more. And so I'm really excited to begin that process. But first, I have to let a lot of years ago, about 30 plus years ago, I went on I had a travel experience, and I had no idea how significantly that experience was going to impact my life for years to come. And it was like this kind of unfolding. God just kept bringing more and more almost surprises about how that experience was impacting and shaping how I looked at things, understood things. And so, what I want to tell you now, as I talk to you about this journey, this pilgrimage to Israel, I know now that that is going to be a similar experience, because there is no way for me to convey to you how significant the experience was. I'm going to try my best, and I'm going to hopefully share some highlights with you. But I know that this is going to continue to unfold and impact my life and the lives of all of those that I love and serve. So, first, flying to Tel Aviv. If you don't know already, I've got to start with this story that we booked this trip in March of 2023. And my husband and I, we were so excited. We were going to be traveling with Dr. Brian Simmons and his wife, and he's been there 40 times. He's the author of the Passion Translation of the Bible, which I adore. And I read many translations, but Brian's translation just impacts my heart in a very significant way. And so to have this opportunity to go with him was just, you know, we were very, very excited. So fast forward to October of 2023, and we're literally almost packed. I mean, we have 2 weeks of our life, off the calendar, the dog's at a sitter, all of our business and our commitments are, everybody knows that, we're going to be unavailable for a good 2 weeks. And then October 7th happened, which of course was heartbreaking for Israel, for the world. And obviously we weren't going. And so we had the opportunity at that time to either get a refund or to push the funds forward to October of 24. And so we said, oh no, we're not giving up on this dream. We're going to push it forward to 24. And so October of 24 was rolling around. Brian did have some health issues, and those were starting to look like that he was regaining his health. But then he said, we might not go if the fighting starts breaking out in the north, which is exactly what happened. The fighting started breaking out in the north of Israel, the Houthis, the Hezbollah. And so that trip was canceled. And so again, we had the opportunity to, and at this point, we're a little like, okay, should we just get the funds back? But it was like, no, we are going, And I remember my husband saying, look, we don't have to pay attention to what's going on in the world in order to decide if we're going to go or not. All we need to know is if Brian's going, we're going to go, because he's been there. He's very close with the guides and people there. And if he's going, then it's safe for us to go. That was our decision-making process. So fast forward, 2025 is rolling around, and we are like, oh my gosh, I think we're really going. So we did go. And we were on the plane to JFK, on the tarmac, getting ready to leave. And I literally took a picture of the screen of, like on our way to Tel Aviv, 11 hours to go, 5,000 miles or whatever it was. I don't even know, a lot. Let me see if it even says on here the mileage somewhere. Anyway, I literally thought, are we going to really go? So I just give you that backstory. There was great anticipation. However, we didn't really have like a bunch of expectations about what was going to happen. Now, we did prepare, and I want to share this with you because the Holy Spirit kind of just led us into this. And so if you're ever, and I pray that you have the opportunity to go, and maybe some of you have already been, but the blessing to go. What we did to prepare, there were a couple things. We knew our itinerary. We knew what the significant biblical sites were, the significant biblical things that happened at that itinerary stop, and the scriptures that went along with that. So we were able to read the scriptures and get familiar with the itinerary, and oh, this is what happened there. And yeah. And these were the corresponding scriptures. Then we went on to YouTube. And we just typed in that destination, and it was amazing how much information came up. So we really kind of felt like we had our bearings at least. We weren't going in cold, if you will. We weren't going in like, now what is this? We had some sense of a little bit of understanding. Believe me, I'm, you know, a little bit of understanding. So fast forward, we arrive in Tel Aviv. Brian's got balloons up in the gate area. We're meeting people, saying hello, taking pictures with him. And then they know this trip so well. They knew exactly what we were gonna need after an 11-hour flight. We were gonna need a little bit of rest. We couldn't jump right in. And so they took us to Netanya, which is outside of Tel Aviv on the Mediterranean Sea, and we had this beautiful, it was Shabbat, it was on a Friday. And so we had this beautiful view, and we got to just, take a little nap and then walk, along the edge of the water, and just get a little bit of rest. We had a Shabbat dinner that evening, starting to meet people. And I remember some of those conversations very early on, and I could cry now because how those people that I was meeting that night and just getting to know how significant they became in our lives. So fast forward, they gave us this beautiful book, a devotions book that also went through the itinerary of a day every day, gave a morning and evening prayer, and talked about where we were going, reminding us of the scriptures that were there. So we just had that opportunity to rest, get the sunset in. And so we head out on our very first day, which is really our second day, but our first day of touring, and it was going to be a packed day. It was 7:30 in the morning till probably 7 o'clock that night. And the sites, we first went to Caesarea Maritime, which is where Herod had built a huge palace on the sea, which is where Paul had been imprisoned. Um, and we actually worshiped in the actual holding tank, which was an old cistern they turned into a prison and a holding tank. And we literally got to worship in that spot where Paul literally was. Now, I want to share something with you that's really cool. Brian, after being there so often and being a biblical scholar, he does with the Passion Translation. He has many other scholars that assist him in the Aramaic, the Greek, in Hebrew. But when he goes to Israel, he looks at sites as an A, B, or a C. And what that means is for him, an A site it's not only a biblical site that we know from scripture, archaeologically, that site has been confirmed. So something archaeologically had to confirm that that site was indeed there. And then there has to be another text outside of the Bible and outside of archaeology that also confirms. So you're really like at the 99 to 100%, this is where this happened. Okay. An example of that, and this is kind of an easy one, but an example of that would be the Sea of Galilee. I mean, clearly we know that Jesus was on the Sea of Galilee multiple times. And scripture tells us that, and we know that. So that would be an easy A site, but there are many other sites. If it's a B site, it's likely, and the Bible says it, and there's a little bit of evidence of it, but there is not enough evidence to make it an A site. And then a C site would be, well, people think this is. All right. So as we go along, I'll be able to indicate some of those things. Well, the prison cell where we were, it was an A site. Caesarea, the palace that Herod built, is definitely an A site, and we got to experience, all right. So after that, we went up to Mount Carmel, and of course, Brian is just so funny. I mean, he's just I just love him. He just exudes love for the Lord, for people, and he has a levity to him that is just so refreshing. And so I just share this because I love him. But we were on Mount Carmel, and he's like, "Oh, by the way, after this, we're going to be going to Mount Fudge." And we all were just like, because we're all like, we baited, like, "Oh, where are we going next?" He's like, "Mount Fudge." And, everyone's laughing, but that's just to give you an idea of Brian. So we're on Mount Carmel, and what's so fascinating about this site, and I'm not even going to get into all the biblical things about the site, other than to tell you that you go up to the highest point, and they literally have these markers all along the low wall, all the way around. You almost can see, I know this sounds incredulous, but it's true. Almost can see the entire Bible. And what I mean by that is, like, out here, that is where Abraham, that is where Jericho is. That is where the Sea of Galilee is. That is where, and so that is where they cross the Jordan River. That is where, all of these biblical things that we've heard about since we were little or know. You literally could point to all of these things in the region because you're up at such a high peak. So that was just a kind of mind-blowing experience. Then we start working our way towards the Sea of Galilee, and we get into the Galilee region. And we go by this cave, and this is a B plus site, closer even to like an A minus site. It is a cave in the Galilee region. And when you see, Capernaum and Magdala and the springs, you start to kind of get a feel for where the Mount of Beatitudes was. That's an A site where the Sermon on the Mount was. And so when you get to a feel for this region, and then you see this cave, and you know that Jesus went away. And if you watch The Chosen, you've seen him. He would go off in because he wanted to go pray. He needed that time to get away. Such a word for us. But this cave, we literally drove by the cave a couple times and it was just surreal. It's like right there, where Jesus would have gone away. Then we go down to what's called Job's Spring. And this is an A site. This is literally the spring where Job was restored after everything that he'd gone through, just that the spring of a life, that renewal, right? And so that was a really beautiful experience. It was sunset. And I just took my shoes off and walked through the spring, and it was just gorgeous. Then one of the highlights, and there were so many, all of these things are just like, you have this sort of surreal, like you're in this constant state of surrealness. And what I want to pause for a moment and also share is that there's a number of things going on. You have the physical reality of being on a bus, being with people, being with community, worshiping with people, reading scripture together, the physicality of meals and eating and meeting new people. You have the physical reality of being in Israel. And by the way, I will tell you that in this, you know, for whatever it's worth, we not one time ever felt any fear of any kind. Nobody ever boarded our bus. We never had anything. We never sensed anything going on in the world. It was really kind of amazing. But because some people ask about that, they're like, "Oh, be safe, be safe." Well, we couldn't have been felt safer, I'll say. So, I was talking about the physical things, right? And then you got the idea that you're in Israel and you want to understand the map, if you will. So you've got that part of the physical, like there's a map and you're looking at it and you're trying to understand things. So you're trying to be a student, right, and learn. Then you've got the reality of the surrealness of your spiritual life being impacted and God's presence. Now, we know that God is everywhere now, right? And he's within us as believers. But there is something different about being in the physical space where Jesus was. I just can't even, you might be able to imagine it, but it just was very, very impactful. And it was very hard to even, I just, for like 3 days, just tears would come. It was surreal and it was beautiful and it was joy filled. But it was amazing. So now we go into Magdala, which is where Mary Magdalene was from. Now we know a few things from this. There was an ancient road that we know Jesus would have walked on because it was the road and it was the only way into Magdala. There was a synagogue found. Now here's a super cool story. So Israel owns the land. The government owns the land, and when they give land to, let's say, or I don't have to buy, lease, I don't know how it works, but like a big company was building a hotel along the Sea of Galilee in Magdala. And when anybody's doing any building project, they have to stop immediately if they start finding anything that looks like an archaeological remain, which you can imagine all over Israel, they're everywhere. And this is how so many things have been confirmed about the Bible from archaeology, because Israel is so careful to stop the construction. So literally this hotel, it's really cool. This hotel was built and then they built this massive um um glass wall to protect around an ancient synagogue. Now this synagogue was this we're talking about within the past 30 years. This synagogue was found even like in the early 2000s. And we know that Jesus would have taught in that synagogue. And so and there's layers of it still. And anyway, but there were some just really amazing experiences there. And there is a church there that is dedicated to women, women of the Bible, early in the Bible, and it is a place that just anoints women, blesses women, encourages women. And there is this painting that's in the bottom of this, beautiful church that is the woman reaching for the hem of his garment. And all it is her hand, her finger start to reach. And as it touches it, you start to see the healing at the tip of her finger start to come into her entire body. It was so powerful. Then Brian did a service for the women, for all of the women that were there, and asked the men to come around us. And my husband had his hands on my shoulders. And it was just because Brian asked us to forgive the men in our lives for the times when they didn't lift us up, when they didn't champion us, and they didn't encourage us. And then he asked the men to forgive us for the times when we maybe pushed them aside or didn't respect them, or, it just was this beautiful, beautiful. I mean, I could feel my shoulders, the kind of those inward tears, inward tears. It was those. So even though the tears were coming down, there wasn't vocal. It was like everything was happening inside, but I could feel my husband responding as well. And I turned around to him when we were done, and the tears were just coming down his face, and I just put my hands on his cheeks, and it just was this beautiful, beautiful. Oh, I can't even. So um, you can even look up that portrait from Magdala. And waking up, literally our hotel, we finally get to the hotel that night, and we are on the Sea of Galilee. We are in David's Harp, it's called. So if you look from up above, the whole hotel is shaped like a harp. And we get up early the next morning, and guess where we go? The Sea of Galilee. And we're out on this boat, and we're worshiping out there, and it just was surreal. And the pastor said he told us to point our arm like that and point our arm like that. So we were making like a big 90-degree angle, and we were pointing our hands towards the shore in the Galilee region. And he said that 70% of the New Testament, the gospel, happened within your outstretched arms. And just to realize, because there were miles, there's a Jesus trail that I think is like 40 miles long. But in that region there, all of the things that happened, that's Capernaum primarily, and Tiberias and Magdala. And so much happened in that region. It was really amazing. So then we go to the church where Peter, there's a few things that happened at this rock that they have. Number one, this is this is a B site. There's a Catholic church and then a Greek Orthodox church, and they're sort of feuding as to who's right about exactly where along the shore of the Sea of Galilee. So what do we know? All the things that happened when Jesus initially came and said, "Cast your nets to the other side." And that's when Peter, falls out of the boat, and he says, come follow me. And they go. So that happened there. Then after the resurrection, when Peter is devastated that he's done the very thing he said he would never do, which is deny Christ 3 times. And so what does the Lord do? He appears at this location, and he asks him 3 times. So just hear the healing in this. He says, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, "Well, of course I love you, Lord." And then a little bit goes on, "Peter, do you love me?" "Lord, you just asked me. Of course I love you." And then a 3rd time, "Peter, do you love me?" And it was then that Peter realized what the Lord was doing. He was erasing the 3 denials of him. And so there's this beautiful statue there of Jesus and Peter, and it was just really the Lord anointing Peter, restoring Peter. Peter's heart just needed to be restored, and the forgiveness. It was beautiful. And the rock is there, and of course we grabbed a rock, and then we went and ate fish. And Brian, again, I told you he's funny. He's like, these are Peter's ancestors, the ancestors of Peter's fish that he was fishing for. So that was really cute. Took this great shot of all of us on the Sea of Galilee. And then we start getting into Capernaum and the ruins there, and this town. And it has not been fully excavated, but you can see the town. You can also see they found, and it's under this church because the church is protecting the ruins now. But way down deep, you can see where the 1st century Christians had marked Peter's house. they had used symbols and things there. And so they are very, very confident that this is Peter's house. This is where after the Lord rose and they went back to Capernaum and they're growing the first century church, that this is where they would have been meeting in secret. And at Peter's house. So that was a really, and they found a synagogue there, and we got to experience that. So yeah, just amazing. Um, let's see. Then we go to the Mount of Beatitudes, which was, it was this beautiful day, and I have this video recording of Brian's teaching from the Mount, and the bird song behind him is just like a movie. But the views from up there are gorgeous, and why they were so confident that this is the location. So that was just an amazing experience. And of course, there's a big church up there now, and different places where you can sit and worship. But you're up there looking out at the Sea of Galilee and the whole region. Then we went to Mount Arbel. Mount Arbel is the place where, after the resurrection, the Lord took a few of the disciples and commissioned them. This is the Great Commission. So we didn't go up to the top, but we walked all through there. Also along there is the Jesus Trail. They call it the Jesus Trail because it would have been definitely, he would have walked this path. Everybody walked this path. It was how you got from point A to point B. So it's not like really a question. We know that Jesus would have walked that path. And I took this picture along the path of, the parable when the Lord's talking about he threw the seed out and some landed on a stony path, and then some landed in the bristles and thorns. And it was exactly that along the Jesus path. So the point was, what the parables Jesus were using, he was using things that they would have immediately identified with in their lives. So that was just super cool. Then we go to the River Jordan. And my husband and I were baptized as babies, but not adult immersion. So it was our first time at an adult baptism. And we had these beautiful white garments on, and we went out into the River Jordan, and it just was, I can't. And then when we came out, people just prophesied over us. And I wish I had a recording of that. But I know it's recorded here in my heart. And it was just an amazing experience. My husband and I just were very impacted. I took a video of the buffet. Israelis eat salads pretty much 3 at every meal. And so that was really fun to just the different, yeah. Then we go to the crossing. Was the closest we were to probably Jordan. There was a big checkpoint there, but again, they never boarded our bus or anything like that. But and there's a church on the other side, so some mosques on the other side, but this is where Jesus would have been baptized, and this is where Joshua would have crossed the Jordan into the Promised Land. So that was, whoa, again. Then we go to, if you're not familiar with the Dead Sea Scrolls, we go to Qumran. Hold on, I did, yeah, Qumran. Qumran, thank you, Lord. Qumran. And they literally found these ancient scrolls. It's probably the biggest biblical find in the world ever, because they were so kept. But there were during the time of Jesus, these particular men and probably some women left because they did not like what was happening in Jerusalem, and they sensed that the end was going to be coming, and so they wanted to save these documents, and they put them in these huge jars in these caves. And a shepherd recently was throwing a rock, and it hit something, and he was like, "What was that?" And it's an amazing story. I won't go on, but well, I will tell you. Because the parchment is leather, it's written on leather. It's not just paper like we think of paper. And so this shepherd didn't know what he'd found, and so he took this to a guy to have him make shoes. And the guy said, "I can't make shoes with this." And then somehow it got into some other hands. Well, the Israeli government ended up paying $1 million for these scrolls, ancient scrolls. And so Qumran was an amazing experience just to see how they lived, all of the baths, the ritual baths, the mikvahs that they were in. We saw the actual, because I think they found them in like 14, 15 caves, but the one that they found the most from, I took a picture of that cave. Then just because they know the trip so well. And like I said at the beginning, they knew that we would need that rest when we got off that flight. We needed some rest now. This was like 3 very heavy full days, spiritually heavy, physically heavy, all the things. And so we go to the Dead Sea. Floating in the Dead Sea was just a once in a lifetime experience. You could literally lay there and it looks like something's holding you up, and it's not. 400 meters below sea level, and just there's nothing living in it because it's all salt. It's a dead end, so there's so much salt in there that you just bob. Bob is like not that's an understatement. You literally are on top of the water, and that was like you could put your feet down and then like sit down, and as soon as you started to lift one foot off, it literally the water just like threw your feet up in the air and you were just lying back. Um, so that was an amazing experience. And then we went to Masada. If you don't know about Masada, maybe you've read the book The Dove Keepers, which is about Masada. It's of course it's a historical fiction book, but it's a very good book. And these women kept the doves. The doves were how they communicated. But this is where there were 8 rebellions. The Jews were fighting against the Romans, and we're talking about 66 AD, so 66 years after Jesus. And Jesus had said, the temple's going to come down, no walls will be standing. Well, by 70 AD, the Romans destroyed the temple. And the reasons why they did is because the Jews were revolting. They'd had it with the oppression. And there were 8 revolts. After the 7th revolt and the temple comes down, as many Jews as were still alive fled to Masada. It was an ancient palace of Herod's, and Herod never lived there, but he provided, he sourced, he had water there, massive cisterns there, massive food storages there, so that if he ever did need to escape, he could go there. And it was a fortress up on top of a mountain. You can look it up right now on YouTube. Masada, Masada. Phenomenal. And then the Romans came, and there was this huge siege. And I won't tell you the whole story because you need to watch the movie or look at it, but we got to go to Masada, and it was an incredible experience. After Masada, we went to the Valley of Elah. And if you've been watching David on the Netflix series that was been out, that is where David killed Goliath. So you've got the Philistines on one side and the Jews on the Judea, the tribes on the other side, and Goliath is shouting and David kills him. And there's the creek there where you could go down to the creek bed and pick up a rock, like David picked up a rock at that creek bed, and why they are certain that that is the site. Things that they found there. Then we went to the road to Emmaus. We went to a church right where that commemorates the spot where Jesus would have, and again, that's probably a B because you can't necessarily know it was the exact place, but Cleopas is one of the men that Jesus appeared to on the road to Emmaus, and was talking with them like, why are you so upset? What happened? And so he's asking them all these questions, and they're like, what do you mean? How do you not know? And so that encounter with those 2 men, and then later they encounter him again and they realize it's Jesus. But Jesus hid himself from them. He hid who he was while he was talking to them. But we had a beautiful worship night there. Then we get to Jerusalem. So can you believe it? All of this, and we're still not to Jerusalem. We get to Jerusalem and we see the Wailing Wall, and the southern steps where we know 100% all the way Jesus would have walked and taught on those steps. So we had a major worship time there. We had a lot of worship times. My husband said, being with so many incredible people who love the Lord for that period of time was so impactful. And I want you to imagine, just like we were at church yesterday and we were worshiping and singing, but we don't know a lot of the people at church. So imagine that's just an hour, right? Worshiping with people that love the Lord, but you don't really know them. So imagine worshiping with people that you now are starting to really get to know. You know about their lives, their children, their grandchildren, what's going on in their lives, and you're worshiping with them every day. And you've had this whole day with them experiencing all these things, and you're worshiping with them. So I took my prayers and I took it into there's a male side, men and women at the Wailing Wall. And so I took my little prayers in and put them in. And the women, I believe the men do this too, but I didn't see it as much on that side because I was paying attention to the women. But when they move away from the wall, which is the actual only remains of the temple that was torn down. And the temple was where the Lord was present. That is where they would go to have connection with the Lord, sacrifice, be cleansed. So it's very significant for the Jews. And they back away. They do not turn their back on the wall and walk away. They walk away looking at the wall. And that was sort of cool. We kind of were like, oh, we kind of missed it. We didn't know about that. So, but the Southern Steps was profound. Then we went to the Gihon, I think it is, spring, and there's so many things that happen with this spring. It's likely that this is how David got into this, became the city of David. But Ezekiel or Hezekiel, hold on. Um, yeah, Hezekiah, sorry, Hezekiah. He was the one who rerouted the water into Jerusalem so that they would have water from all these different springs. And so we got to go down into this spring. It was an amazing experience. I had water up to like my hips and then it receded and it was really just like to my calf. And it was cool temperature and beautiful. And we were singing in there. And at one point, we all stopped and turned off any flashlight or phone. So it was completely pitch black and we were singing. And I took a recording of it. It was a very surreal, amazing moment. Let's see. We on that ended at the pool of Siloam, where Jesus would have he healed the man with the mat. No, that's pool of Bethesda. Pool of Siloam. Um, yeah, I'm gonna Second Temple pilgrims. Um, but that is where that would have definitely been there in the time of Jesus. Then we go to Mount Gerizim. And that's a whole nother biblical story. But looking down from Mount Gerizim, you could see Jacob's well, you could see Joseph's tomb about where they were, but they would have been down in that valley of Shechem. Mount Arbel was across the way. And literally, we walk into church yesterday, and what is our pastor teaching on? Mount Gerizim. What does he do? Throws up a picture of modern day Mount Gerizim with Shechem in the valley, and I have it on my phone. And that was just a really cool experience. Just kind of a little wink from the Lord. We went to Shiloh, which is where for 300 and almost 80 years the Ark of the Covenant, so this is God's presence, was there. And all of the tribes would come, however many times a year that they were called because of their religious ceremonies, to come and be all around at this time. And they have archaeological evidence of this happening. And this is why they know this is where the Ark of the Covenant was. And then because God was so specific about how to build the ark, because it had to be taken up and put down, and exactly how to build it, they actually have, through archaeological evidence, they could see that they found the exact measurements that the Lord had given them. And then when Old Jerusalem, we went to the Pool of Bethesda, Mount of Olives. Now I'm starting to get like to the most important parts and feeling like I've got to wrap up, and I don't want to do that. But the Garden Tomb, we had an incredible experience excuse me, first at Mount at Garden of Gethsemane, and a number of very, very beautiful things there. A beautiful church, literally in the garden. There was an olive tree that literally existed in the time of Jesus. The thing is massive. And this is where Jesus was, crying out at the rock. One very significant thing that Brian talked about there, he believes, and I love this, that when Jesus said, Lord, if this cup could pass from me in the Garden of Gethsemane, he wasn't asking, now this is an opinion, but Brian believes, and I believe, that he wasn't asking for the Lord to take away what was coming. Jesus knew it had to be fulfilled. He knew he was going to have to carry the cross, be beaten, be put on that cross, and die on that cross. What he was asking for in that moment in the Garden of Gethsemane was, Lord, give me the strength that I can continue and I can fulfill your will. He's in a human body that's already sweating blood, and he is so overwhelmed about what's going to come, but he says, give me the strength, Lord, so that your will can be fulfilled. So that was a beautiful, beautiful insight. And it just, my spirit just kind of leapt because it never really made sense. I didn't, when they say, oh, well, Jesus said that so that he would know we're human and he just wanted the cup to pass. No, geez, I just didn't believe it. So that was really beautiful. And let's see, after Gethsemane, we went up to the Mount of Olives and looking over all of Jerusalem and prayed over Jerusalem and had a beautiful worship time up there. And then we went to the Garden Tomb. And it's a Protestant location, and they talked about why and how and all the historical and archaeological evidence of this location. And we got to go in the tomb. Um, and then there we had communion and worshiped in that was incredible. There were a number of experiences. There's a Jewish quarter, a Christian quarter, an Arab quarter, all of these way underground tunnels of shops and things. And there was our guide was a Messianic Jew, which means he's Jewish, but he believes in Jesus. And so it was just amazing to have him. He was like an encyclopedia of knowledge. David, I love him. He was 37. He's amazing. But he introduced us to an artist who is also a Messianic Jew. And this one picture, and I'll be posting this, but and it's a lamb with a thorn around its neck, a ring of thorns around his neck. And it says, and with his wounds we were healed. Isaiah 53:5. The artist is Udi Miorez, Merioz. Of course, I know I didn't pronounce any of that properly, but and just then we go on. We did an extension. There was about a third of the group that did this, and we went to Athens, where Paul preached to the people of Athens, Mars Hill, which we know Paul would have been on and preached on that big rocky outcrop. We were in a major thunderstorm there. The next day was just a free day where we were all together on a cruise to three different little Greek islands. And I've got a picture of the whole group passed out in the sun on top deck, completely asleep because we finally let down. Because every day it was up, go, do, and then come home and then eat and then worship and then go to bed. And so this was just our first like complete down day. And so taking that picture of everybody sleeping was a crack up, including, my husband and I. But we had a beautiful day in these different little islands and got to then, do some shopping for family and things like that. And then the big goodbye. But then we got to go to Corinth, which was an incredible experience. We got to see this canal and learn why Corinth was such a wealthy town. There were 900,000 people when Paul lived there. And it was because of the wealth they had well, I won't go into all of it, but we got to see where the town that's excavated where Paul would have lived in like one of these like this for a year and a half he was there. And then there were this an ancient road that is the road he would have walked on. Um, and then we got to eat gyros and like real Greek food served by Corinthians, Corinthian people, which was cool. It's like I'm in Corinth having lunch with Corinthians. And that was really fun, and big Greek salad, and just beautiful views and things. So overall, I know I just went through that really quickly. Some of my biggest takeaways. Well, early on, I was like, Lord, he finally just said, Gail, quit trying to figure it all out. Just rest in this. Just enjoy. Just trust that I will continue to reveal more and more and more to you. And so I did get to relax into that, and just a lot of joy came. I didn't feel like, because there was a part of me like, oh, but I don't want to forget. I don't want to miss. I don't want to, and it's like, stop. You're not going to miss anything that I have for you, Gail. And that was beautiful. I found myself really sort of sad or mystified why, especially in evangelical churches that we've been in for years now, why there isn't so much more of a push to go to Israel. And maybe in your church there has been. We've been in a number of churches in a number of different cities. And I remember there's much more in my remembrance a push to go on a mission trip, which is wonderful, than to go to Israel and to walk where Jesus walked. It impacts your heart, your faith, your life. You're seeing the Bible come alive. Not that you didn't believe it was real before, but now you have this utter knowing. I mean, this utter knowing how real this all is. And it just is, it's very, very significant. And I just pray for anybody who, I know they're going again in October of next year. I know they're going to go to Cana. They change up the itinerary kind of every time. They're going to do a wedding blessing, a marriage blessing in Cana, where of course Jesus did the his first miracle. And yeah, it was life changing. It was marriage changing. Um, just beautiful. And we're still jet lagged. And I'm leaving tomorrow for a retreat to go be with women and just gonna lean into this new encounter of the Lord's love and the truth and the power of who He is more alive than ever in my life. And I am just so incredibly grateful for that. So if you're still listening, thank you. My intention had been to show you a bunch of pictures, but that didn't work. And I wasn't going to delay this any further. So I will be showing, and I have shared pictures in my group. So if you happen to be watching this and you'd like to see some of the pictures, that's in the Kingdom Dream Chasers Facebook group. And if you have any questions or comments or want to know anything, always can reach out to me, gailroot.com or gail@gailroot.com. I'll have my contact information is always in the show notes down below. But thank you for listening to this holy land, holy experience that is really, really hard to put into words. Um, but thank you for being with me today.